Detective Marcus Hale was a man who lived and breathed murder cases. For 3 decades, he hunted the most dangerous predators that stalked the streets of Brookhaven. He didn't just solve crimes, he dismantled them piece by piece. But on the night of his retirement, the hunter became the hunted. His life ended in the very way he dedicated it to preventing. And the real story, it only starts with his death. At 2:14 a.m., a 911 call reported a body at Pier 19's condemned warehouse district. The responding officers couldn't believe their eyes. There, laid out on a rusted metal slab, was Detective Hale, lifeless, cold, and positioned like a grotesque art piece. But this wasn't just murder. It was mimicry. The arrangement wasn't random. It was a haunting recreation of the Rosewood Strangler, a case Hale closed 15 years ago, after an 18-month hunt for a sadistic killer who posed his victims the exact same way. But the Rosewood Strangler had died in prison. So who was behind this? And why Marcus Hale? Every detective carries ghosts, but Hale's most persistent specter was the unsolved disappearance of a young girl, Emma Whitlock, from 23 years prior. A case he refused to close, a case that gnawed at his soul. And now, a chilling coincidence. The stopwatch found in Hale's hand was engraved with the initials EW. For Sarah, this wasn't just another case. Hale was her mentor, her friend, almost family. The deeper she dug, the more personal it became. She noticed something the others didn't. The killer wasn't just sending a message, they were toying with her. Whoever killed Hale knew her too. Hidden deep in Hale's locked desk drawer were hand-scribbled notes. Obsessive, borderline paranoid, pointing toward someone from his past. But the name was always blacked out. One detail kept repeating. Whitlock wasn't the first. She wasn't the last. Surveillance revealed the haunting truth. Hale was being watched. Weeks before his murder, an unidentified figure lingered near his home, his office, even the coffee shop he visited every morning. This wasn't random. This was personal, calculated, planned. 3 days after Hale's funeral, Sarah received an envelope. Inside were crime scene photos, not of Marcus but of Emma Whitlock. The photos were time-stamped 1 week before Hale was murdered. Emma, alive, or at least she had been. If this tape is found, I was close, closer than ever. I couldn't protect her the first time. I know who it is. They were always right here, closer than I ever thought. The tape was recorded 48 hours before his death. Hale knew, but why didn't he tell anyone? The investigation twisted inward. Could the killer be someone inside the department? Someone Hale trusted, someone who knew the cases, the methods, the weaknesses? Sarah's search narrowed. The stopwatch, the photos, the surveillance gaps, they all pointed to one chilling conclusion. The killer had worn a badge. The killer was revealed, Detective Alan Reese, Hale's oldest friend and former partner on the Emma Whitlock case. The man Hale had once trusted with his life. Alan had murdered Emma when they were young officers, and Hale had uncovered the truth in his final days. But the killer struck first, staging the murder as a twisted tribute to his past mistakes. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about control. It was about ending the only man who could stop him. Justice, long delayed, was finally served. Hale's last case wasn't one he solved, but one he sacrificed himself to close. His final notes, his whispered confession, and the clues he planted ensured that even in death, the killer wouldn't win. The hunter fell, but the hunt ended with the truth exposed. Detective Hale had secrets, more than anyone realized. Hidden away in his attic was a private case file, one that never existed in the official records. At the center of it all, a single name, Alan Reese. A name that now meant betrayal but back then had meant brotherhood. The Polaroid wasn't new. It had been developed decades ago, but the background told another story. A house long since demolished, but the address was written on the back, by Hale's own hand. A silent clue, planted for someone to find. But who was meant to see it? Detective Hale had been leading a quiet investigation, off the books. Payments, anonymous drops, and surveillance equipment hidden away at a suburban storage unit. The trail revealed something far more disturbing. Hale hadn't just suspected Alan Reese. He had been stalking him. Alan Reese's voice. "You should have left it alone, Marcus. You were always too curious for your own good." The tape was short, cold, without remorse. Proof, but not enough for an arrest. Sarah knew the clock was ticking. Reese was still free, and still watching. The address from the Polaroid led Sarah to a place the department had long forgotten. The farmhouse where Emma Whitlock was last seen. But the crime scene wasn't untouched. Inside, a fresh layer of dust covered footprints. Someone had been there, recently, and left behind was the smell of old cologne. The same brand Hale used. Inside the envelope was a confession letter. But not from Reese. It was from Emma Whitlock. Alive. And her message was clear. Hale knew where she had been all these years, and had promised to bring her justice, no matter the cost. In the end, the past was never buried. The case that bonded them as young officers was the same one that destroyed them. Hale had protected Emma, secretly faking evidence to keep her hidden from the real killer, Alan Reese. But Reese found her first, and killed the only man who stood in his way. Justice isn't always found in a courtroom. Sarah knew that better than anyone. The trap was set. A single piece of evidence was leaked, baiting Reese to revisit his crime scene one last time. The hunter was about to become the hunted. In the darkness, Reese admitted it all. The killings, the betrayal, the game he played with Hale for decades. But there was one thing he didn't expect. Hale had recorded their final conversation. A wiretap still admissible. The last puzzle piece was already in place. Reese was finished. Hale's reputation, once clouded by secrecy, was finally restored. He hadn't failed Emma. He had saved her, even at the cost of his own life. The case that haunted him was solved. The killer was behind bars. And for once, the silence in the precinct felt like peace, not unfinished business. The truth was more horrifying than anyone had imagined. Emma Whitlock had been alive, trapped in the shadow of her own murder case, moving from safe house to safe house under false names. Hale wasn't chasing a killer. He was protecting a survivor. But the protection had come at a terrible price. Isolation, fear, and living under the looming shadow of Reese for 2 decades. Emma told her side of the story, every chilling detail. Reese had stalked her for years before the night she vanished. Hale had faked her death to save her life. But the nightmare wasn't over. Emma knew the final piece. There was one more victim still alive. Emma's testimony pointed to another forgotten name, Zoe Marshall, vanished just months after her own disappearance. The chilling twist? Reese had been the lead investigator on Zoe's case too. History wasn't repeating itself. It had never stopped. Following Emma's directions, authorities unearthed a shallow grave near Reese's family hunting lodge. But the grave was empty. A single object was left behind. Another engraved stopwatch, set to the same time as Hale's, 11:43. A message, a countdown, and the killer wasn't finished. The stopwatches, the staged bodies, the cold precision. Every clue revealed the killer's timeline wasn't random. It was a countdown to a final victim. And Sarah was certain, the last target was her. The location was a park bench across from the precinct. The place where Hale used to sit, drinking his morning coffee, long before Reese's betrayal. Sarah sat down, waiting. The minutes ticked away. 11:43 struck. But instead of a killer, a child's voice whispered behind her. "He said you'd come. My name's Zoe." Zoe had survived. Years locked away in hidden basements, shuffled from abandoned properties. Like Emma before her, the mastermind wasn't just Reese. It was a network, a ring of traffickers and killers Hale had nearly exposed, and Reese had been their shield, silencing anyone who got too close. Every unsolved case Hale had worked on, every missing girl, every open lead, it all pointed back to the same source. Reese was the face, but the machine behind him had operated undetected for decades. Hale had died trying to bring them all down, and now Sarah had the evidence to finish what he started. With Zoe and Emma's testimony, Sarah's team executed the largest coordinated arrest in Brookhaven's history. Dozens of hidden predators, pillars of the community, law enforcement veterans, all exposed in the light of day. The justice Hale died for was finally being served. Marcus Hale spent his life solving murders, but his greatest case was one he died to solve. His sacrifice freed Zoe, saved Emma, and exposed a network no one else had dared to touch. The hunter may have fallen, but his final case will never be forgotten. Names, dates, locations. Every victim Reese had touched or targeted was logged in cold, meticulous handwriting. But one name was circled over and over again. A name Sarah didn't recognize, L. Whitmore. The final thread still dangled. Whitmore was the key witness who had tried to expose Reese's crimes decades ago, silenced not by death, but by fear. Now, in his twilight years, he finally spoke the truth. Reese wasn't working alone. He was only the beginning. Justice had been rigged from the start. The judge, an old friend of Reese's father, had buried the Whitlock case under false rulings and lost files. The system Hale trusted had been compromised for years. No bars could undo what he'd done. But facing her captor wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. Her voice didn't shake as she told him, "You didn't win. You only delayed the ending." For years, Zoe's voice had been caged. Now, her words painted the jury's minds with undeniable truth. Every lie Reese ever told crumbled under the weight of her story. The entire room held its breath. And when the judge asked for a verdict, the silence was deafening. On all counts, guilty. It took years, a trail of bodies, and the sacrifice of one detective, but justice had finally spoken. Reese wouldn't walk free. Not this time. In the letter, Hale didn't speak of fear or regret, only hope. "I know how this ends, Sarah, but promise me this. Don't let it end with me." His final words were not of himself, but of the victims. Even in death, his mission lived on. The dominoes fell one confession at a time. Brookhaven wasn't just home to a killer, but to an entire structure of silence. The scandal cracked the town open, and for once, the truth flooded every corner. For every name on the wall, there had been silence. For every family, an apology too late. But now the victims' faces were no longer forgotten. They were a monument to Hale's unfinished work. The unsettling truth was that no one ever really knew him. For years, Reese had stood as a symbol of justice while hiding the heart of a predator. And the only person who'd seen the cracks was Hale. Brookhaven learned the hard way. Monsters aren't always strangers. Sometimes they wear badges. A town built on quiet streets and friendly faces had become the site of a reckoning. Two survivors, once lost, now rebuilding their lives from the ruins Reese left behind. They were no longer hidden, no longer silenced, and their voices would echo for a lifetime. Hale's death wasn't in vain. His legacy became the foundation for the department's rebirth. New rules, new leadership, and new eyes, all sharpened by the lessons he paid for in blood. There are some wounds that never fully heal, and some ghosts that never truly leave. But as Sarah stood by his grave, she didn't feel loss. She felt peace. The case was closed. Justice was served. The murder of Marcus Hale wasn't just another case. It was the story of a man who solved murders for a living, until his own became the final puzzle. And in the end, the truth was louder than any lie. Justice served. The case was over. Or so they thought. Buried deep in cold storage, an evidence box from 2004 remained unopened. Inside, a single bloodstained note. "The end was never meant to be yours, Hale." A final taunt. A final clue. Every case Hale worked on. Every victim. Every address. When connected, they mapped something chilling. A symbol. A coded message only Hale could have seen, and one Sarah was just beginning to understand. It wasn't random. It was a location. A place Reese had planned to reveal, but never reached. One final resting place. And perhaps one final victim. The coordinates led to a grave with no headstone. Freshly disturbed earth. Beneath it lay not a body, but a steel lockbox. Inside, photos, dates, names, and a list of victims that hadn't been discovered. Until now, her disappearance had been ruled an accident. A drowning, but the evidence said otherwise. Amy Whitfield had been Reese's first victim, the beginning of it all. Reese's voice on the tape was calm, calculated. It was never about the victims, Marcus. It was about watching you solve them. The ultimate betrayal. A predator hiding in the skin of a partner, orchestrating his own cases for sport. The drive exposed a private network, a black market marketplace where the lives of victims were wagered like currency. Reese had been just one piece of a much bigger machine. There was someone else. Someone pulling the strings before Reese ever struck. A face unknown, a name unspoken, and Sarah's hunt was far from over. Mercer wasn't just Reese's teacher. He was his architect, a master manipulator who shaped killers from the classroom under the guise of academic theory. And Reese was his prized experiment. The mastermind had never pulled the trigger, but every thread led back to him. Mercer had planted ideas, victims, even evidence, turning students into murderers. And Hale had unknowingly walked straight into his grand design. Even in chains, Mercer played his final game. The riddle led Sarah to an abandoned psychiatric hospital, a locked room, and inside the impossible, Amy Whitfield alive. For 15 years, she had been erased from the world, kept alive as proof of Mercer's twisted control. A living witness, the final nail in the coffin. Mercer's trial shook the world. A professor who turned education into indoctrination. Victim after victim, testimony after testimony. The puzzle was finally complete, and the jury didn't hesitate. Life without parole, the mastermind stripped of power, forever trapped behind bars. Justice wasn't just served, it was cemented. He solved murders for a living, and in the end, his own became the one that exposed it all. His sacrifice brought the truth into the light, and justice at last stood tall. Stay tuned for more chilling cases on Cold Case Chronicles, where the truth is always darker than fiction. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to Cold Case Chronicles. We dive deeper into the most chilling, unsolved mysteries, and together, we uncover what was left behind. Like, share, and leave a comment below. We want to hear your thoughts. Stay vigilant. Stay curious. The truth never rests.